Hello and welcome to the Pandemic Baseball Book Club's presentation of A's versus Giants, a game show in which purported experts of these two teams square off who knows more and who can most capably charm our judges. I'm Jason Turbo, author of They Bled Blue, which is about neither the A's nor the Giants. It's about the Dodgers. Please forgive me, Bay Area. In today's show, our contestants will each make arguments for why some facet of their team is better or more important than a similar facet of the opposition. Their answers will be considered by our select panel of judges, and points will be awarded accordingly. Not necessarily for the answer that is most correct, but for the position that our judges feel was laid out most convincingly. Let us start by introducing our judges. Joan Ryan not only wrote a book with former Giants catcher Bengie Molina, but actually works for the Giants, having been their senior media advisor since 2008. A role in which she prepares player biographies for the press, schools players on how to interact with reporters, and basically makes the Giants the best team in Major League Baseball when it comes to setting the table for reporters to do their jobs. As a reporter, Joan, I appreciate you.
Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, at least I can do.
Happy to be here.
Her new book is Intangibles, Unlocking the Science and Soul of Team Chemistry. Chris Haft covered the A's for the San Jose Mercury News in 2004. He went to the Giants beat the following season. He stayed there for the next 13 years, 11 of them for MLB.com. He has written 3 books about the Giants, most recently From the Stick to the Cove, along with legendary Giants clubhouse manager Mike Murphy. Finally, Ray Ratto, Bay Area sports writing institution, has like Joan, been a columnist for both the San Francisco Chronicle and the San Francisco Examiner. He covered sports on TV for NBC Sports Bay Area for nearly a decade. He hosted a radio show on KNBR. As if that wasn't enough, Ray joined Deadspin last year as a contributor and has now made the leap to their latest endeavor, Defector, to which I have already purchased a subscription because it looks just that good. Judges, all 3 of you, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now let's meet our contestants. Representing the A's, Eric Stenholm is a salesperson for a graphics company, selling billboards and stadium signage and the like. He comes from a family of A's fans that he worries might actually hate the Giants more than they love the A's. And that, Eric, kind of worries me. I think he'll be fine. 2020 would have been his 10th consecutive season as a season ticket holder at the Oakland Coliseum, were there season tickets to purchase. And finally, Eric did some play-by-play and TV studio work for Cal State East Bay back when he was a student there, not so very long ago. Welcome, Eric. And representing the Giants, Charles Fraccia. This is of a slightly different vintage than Eric. He's been a Giants fan since the 1970s, to such a degree that his fandom was documented in the Amazon Prime movie, The Adventures of Superfan, and in a story written last year for The Athletic by one of my own favorite sports writers, Dan Brown. And I have to say that when that story came out, Brad Balukchin and I discussed it at length long before we ever founded this club. So I didn't know I was aware of you, but I was aware of you. He works for KGO TV's 7 on Your Side, helping consumers deal with big companies over issues that they haven't been able to get sorted out on their own. So our winner today will walk away with every Giants and A's related book from the Pandemic Baseball Book Club's roster, including Chris Haft's From the Stick to the Cove, John Shea's book with Willie Mays, 24, Life Stories and Lessons from the Say Hey Kid, Dale Tafoya's Billy Ball, Billy Martin and the Resurrection of the Oakland A's, and my own Dynastic Bombastic Fantastic, Reggie Raleigh Catfish, and Charlie Finley's Swingin' A's. I'm excited you guys are all here. I think this will be fun. Let's get started. I think we're going to go hot right out of the gate with our first question, and the pressure is on you, Eric, to make a case here because the numbers are in Charles's favor. We're going to compare number 24s. Ricky Henderson for the A's or Willie Mays for the Giants. Eric, start us off on why Ricky should get the nod. You will have 30 seconds, after which you will hear this, which means wrap it up. Ready, set, go.
Okay, Ricky Henderson is the greatest leadoff hitter of all time. He's the all-time leader in runs scored. He's the all-time leader in stolen bases. He had a career on-base percentage over 400. I believe he's the best left fielder of all time. If you're going to pick like a starting 9 for MLB all time, I think it would be almost unanimous that they would pick Ricky Henderson. Willie Mays is great, but I don't think he could have held up the way Ricky did for, I believe it was 24 seasons in an era that got a little more difficult as it went along. Willie Mays was playing in an era that was a little easier than the one Ricky played in.
All right. Excellent argument, and it's true. Ricky played until he was like 100 years old. Charles, what do you got?
All right. My argument is that Willie Mays is the greatest player who ever played, I think. He actually played in a more difficult era because you had fewer teams, which meant the quality of pitching was better. He was a better all-around player. He was a, multiple, he would have stolen more bases if that was necessary for him to do, which in that era that he played, it wasn't. He did hit a lot of home runs, 660. He also played at Candlestick Park, which is an incredibly difficult ballpark to play in. Coming from the Seal Stadium, which I don't know what the quality of difficulty was there. And prior to that, he played in the Polo Grounds, which had a tremendously huge center field, and he covered it.
And he did. All right, what do you think of those answers? Let's start with you, Joan.
I knew you were going to start with me. Well, I mean, my answer is obvious. I think for any baseball fan, it'd be tough to go against Willie Mays, against anyone as impressive as Ricky Henderson was. And your argument, very strong, Eric. But there's nobody like Willie Mays. And having read 24, John Shea's book, more than ever, I'm impressed with Willie Mays on so many levels. And the fact that he did have to play in the Polo Grounds and Candlestick Park, no question, I'm going with Willie Mays.
Joan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Shea also wrote a book with Ricky Henderson.
Yeah, he did. I'm not mentioning that part, Jason, but thank you for bringing it up.
Okay, Chris, what do you say?
Eric's right. Ricky Henderson is the greatest leadoff hitter of all time. But if they had switched positions, Willie Mays could have led off, I think, a lot better than, significantly better than Ricky would have done in the 3-4 spots in the order, although Ricky would have been a pretty darn good 3-hitter. I'll give you that. But Willie would have loved to have led off all his career. He would have been, as Joan mentioned, or both Joan and Charles mentioned, he would have stolen a lot more bases. So I have to go with Mays here.
Okay, Ray Ratto.
Eric, they screwed you on the question. Ricky Henderson is one of the 10 best players of all time. Willie Mays is one of the 2 best. And the only reason I wouldn't make him a unanimous one is because, segregation or not, Babe Ruth also pitched. So I'm willing to let people argue that. But Mays was, and it's not even a comparison point. It's just, Mays was the fullest of the 5-tool guys.
All right, Eric, let's see if we can make it up with this trivia question. Given our topic today, we of course have to examine the 1989 World Series between those 2 clubs, which is the most prominent meeting between the Giants and the A's of the modern era. Those were the Bash Brothers years, yet the Giants actually hit more homers in 1989 during the regular season. So here is the question, worth 1 point. Because you don't have buzzers, just shout your names. Whoever shouts their name first will get to answer. Eric, since you have a soft E at the beginning of your name, in order to be better heard, I recommend that you use the name Catfish. Between both clubs, only 1 player hit more than a single home run during that World Series. Who was it?
Catfish.
Eric?
Dave Henderson.
Correct! It was Dave Henderson. Let's move on to the next question. Each team has had a Hall of Fame worthy manager during its Northern California tenure. So, Bruce Bochy with the Giants, or Tony La Russa with the A's. Eric, you started last time. Charles, why don't you kick us off?
I would go with Bochy because I think Bochy had to work with less. Not less in terms of, he had to build, he had to build the teams. Not build the teams, but he had to like create a chemistry. He had to get them on the same page. He had to get them to win without having like a huge, tremendous amount of talent that La Russa had. So he was, but although they did have great pitching and a great bullpen, he was going with like, Freddie Sanchez at second base, who then became, Ryan Theriot, who then became, on and on and on, so he had like transitional players.
Eric, what do you got?
I would go La Russa here, unsurprisingly. You kind of put me behind the 8 ball again in that he had 1 title with the A's while Bochy had 3 with the Giants. But I will say those 2010, 2012, and 2014 Giants teams are a little bit overrated. They had to really run the gauntlet through the NL playoffs. And then in the World Series, especially in 2014, where they were only an 88-win team. All 3 of La Russa's teams that made the World Series were powerhouses that steamrolled the American League as they went through the playoffs. They struggled in the 1990 World Series and the 88 World Series, but in every other postseason series under La Russa, they were basically lights out. So I'm going to go with Tony on this one.
Sounds great. Ray, what do you think?
I thought Charles's argument was slightly more compelling because if you believe that managers show their worth with not inferior teams but lesser teams, Bochy had lesser teams. La Russa's one great failing, I think, is that he let 1990 get away from him, because that was a series that was there to be won. The Dodgers were a funky team and a difficult team to play, so that doesn't bother me. I think he was far smarter than Roger Craig was in handling the earthquake. But Bochy's benefit is that he took 3 teams that were largely pitchers and bullpen and ordinary hitters and made it work 3 times, because managers get graded in October. And those are 3 championships that, frankly, they were the inferior team in all of them. So that would be my lean.
Okay. Joan, what say you?
Well, I think Eric, makes a good argument, and you obviously have to admire La Russa on every level. Everywhere he's gone, his teams win, and and he did have a lot of talent with those A's teams, but sometimes that's really challenging. You had all those stars, and he had some real challenging characters on that team that he kept it working together. They were, as they say, pulling on the rope the same direction. However, and again, I was there with the Giants during those Bochy years, and to Ray's point, I think what's the most important thing a manager can do is to get the most out of the talent that he actually has. And, of course, I go back to my team chemistry, but that, there's a lot of levels to how do you get the most out of your talent. And one of the things I really, really admire Bochy for, 2 things come to mind. One is that he understood his players. He understood them as people and what they needed, and he really understood what they had to offer and how far they could go. I mean, I don't know anybody who managed his pitching staff. He had Rigetti next to him, of course, which helps, but managed that pitching staff brilliantly. And the second thing he had was timing. And during the postseason, the rah-rah stuff, you don't need it during the season. The season's just too long, and it gets annoying to people if you're too rah-rah. But Bochy had just impeccable timing of when to just hold his hand on the rudder and when to open the engine or whatever you call it. And he was never wrong in 10, 12, and 14. Never wrong. And he got the most out of the talent that he had.
Remarkable to see. All right, so you're voting Bochy.
I am voting Bochy.
Chris Haft.
I feel really bad for Eric. Ray's right. He ought to sue. But La Russa was fabulous his teams were powerhouses, and that made him look, all the more, masterly in running his clubs. But I covered those 10, 12, and 14 teams that Bochy managed managed for the Giants, and maybe that makes me a little bit biased. But Ray said managers are graded for how they manage in the postseason, also for how they run their pitching staff. Now, La Russa shouldn't be penalized for having a great closer in Dennis Eckersley, but Bochy won in 2010 with Brian Wilson as a closer, 2012 with, I guess, Romo as a closer, key closer, and 2014 essentially Madison Bumgarner was a closer. You know, he started and completed his own wins, and then of course we all know what he did in Game 7. So he had to engineer things a lot more, I think. And again, there's nothing wrong with Eric's argument, but it's tough not to go with Bochy because of the way the way he handled the pitching and especially the closer's role, which is so crucial.
So point to Charles. Let's go back to another trivia question. Eric, this is your chance to catch up. Again, we'll head back to the 1989 World Series. During that series, the A's as a team accomplished something that had been done only 3 times before by the 1963 Dodgers, the 1966 Orioles, and the 2004 Red Sox. What was it?
Catfish.
Catfish. Eric, what do you got?
The A's never trailed in the entire series.
That is spot on. It's easy to forget in the wake of the earthquake. The A's never trailed. Other fun facts, at the time it represented the longest gap between World Series meetings between franchises. 77 years, the last time they'd met was 1913 in New York and Philadelphia, respectively. Okay, next question for the two of you. We will head to the Monumental Move West category. Which team was more important, the 1958 Giants or the 1968 A's? Eric, lead us off.
I believe it's the 68 A's. When they came to Oakland, they started out with a winning season. I believe they went 82-80 that year. They really just kind of laid the groundwork for what would become the greatest dynasty in Bay Area baseball. More impressive than the 2010 through 2014 Giants. The A's won 3 in a row, 5 West titles in a row, and it all started with the 68 team. The attendance may not have been, what the Giants had at that point, but it caught up once the A's started winning. So I'll say the 68 A's.
Excellent. Charles, what say you?
Okay, my argument is the 58 Giants, of course, because you had Orlando Cepeda was Rookie of the Year in 58. You had Marichal in 60. You had McCovey in 59. So you were building basically kind of the team of the decade. And the Giants had the most wins in the 1960s. Only 1 World Series appearance, unfortunately.
Okay, Chris Haft, lead us off. What do you think?
I'm going to go to Eric this time. Let's take his side. I mean, with the A's, just on that 68 team, Catfish, Reggie, Sal Bando, the nucleus, the core of those teams that Campaneris, I believe, was Dick Green, the core of those teams that won those 3 World Series in 72 through 74. The 58 Giants will always be, beloved among their fans, for who they had, with Mays and Cepeda. And you look at the intangibles, they were here first, I guess you'd say. And, Russ Hodges and Lon Simmons, the broadcasters had a whole heck of a lot to do with how, Major League Baseball was perceived in the Bay Area. But if you had to take your question literally, 58 Giants, 68 A's, I have to go with Eric and the 68 A's.
Okay. Ray.
I like Eric's argument better because basically the A's, as weird as they were off the field, they were perfect for Oakland on the field. And I think it took a while for San Francisco to figure out what it had in the Giants in 58 and 59 and 60. And I think the biggest mistake they ever made was leaving Seal Stadium because the smell of the brewery across the street was the best thing for baseball. But I think the A's meshed better sort of emotionally and culturally with Oakland than the Giants did. The Giants just showed up in San Francisco because Walter O'Malley moved to LA and talked Horace Stoneham out of moving his team to Minneapolis. So I think there was almost sort of a shotgun wedding approach that the A's didn't have. For whatever else you want to say about Charlie Finley, he chose Oakland. And even though fans hated him, they liked that team because that team was Oakland. So, yeah, Eric or Catfish, well done to you.
Lots alike. Joan.
I go with Eric's argument as well. You know, when you look at the historical impact, you know, obviously the 58 Giants in bringing Major League Baseball west along with the Dodgers, you know, is enormous. But the impact, and, you know, I wasn't here, you know, back in 68, but the impact that the A's had on a single city, you know, I don't know every team that's had the impact on their city, but it's hard to imagine. I mean, the Raiders, obviously, but it's hard to imagine, you know, that a baseball team had more impact on its city than the Oakland A's in 68.
Great foundations for both teams. You had Mays, McCovey, Cepeda, a 19-year-old Mike McCormick on that Giants team, Reggie, Bando, Joe Rudy on the A's. The A's in 68 set the table to reach the World Series 4 years later. So did the Giants in 58. It was almost identical in that way. Moving on to the Hall of Fame pitcher category, where I will ask Juan Marichal or Catfish Hunter. Eric, lead us off.
Catfish Hunter is bona fide Hall of Famer. He is probably the greatest pitcher in A's history. He is an original Oakland A who was on the 68 team. He threw a perfect game at the Coliseum in front of almost no fans, and that kind of was the first thing that happened as far as the A's in Oakland that started them towards their trajectory where they would become a dynasty. You know, his numbers retired by the team for a reason. You know, he is probably the greatest pitcher in A's history. He won 3 World Series. He won multiple titles elsewhere, which I won't mention, but yeah, I think he's far superior. The best pitcher in A's history.
Excellent answer, and kudos for wrapping up within 30 seconds without prompting. Charles, what do you got?
All right, I will go with Marichal. He was a pitcher of the decade of the 60s. He had the most wins in the 60s. One of my favorite things is on his statue at the ballpark, 243 wins, 244 complete games. He was he finished what he started. He was a great pitcher. Slight blemish with his fight with Roseboro, but, you know, became, you know, was a bigger person and cemented a friendship with Roseboro afterwards, which kudos to him as a human being. One
side note, Catfish won the Cy Young in 74. Marichal, this surprised me when I looked it up, never finished higher than 5th. Joan, why don't you lead us off with what you think?
Man, this is a tough one. This is a really tough one. But I do have to say, just for argument, sorry, Charles, because I want to go with Juan Marichal. But I do think Eric made his argument better, you know, with Catfish Hunter. And, you know, he was that spark toward the dynasty and winning 3 World Series. You know, as we say, you know, managers kind of prove themselves in the postseason, and so do players. You know, who stands up to that, who comes through. Of course, you have to get to the World Series in order to win it. So, you know, his team got them there. So Eric, I think you did a really good job with your argument, and I'm going with Catfish Hunter.
Okay, Chris Haft.
This is tough. It's funny. Last night I was looking at Catfish, just happened to be looking at Catfish Hunter's record, and I saw that string of 20-plus victory seasons. I said, oh, my God. That said, Marichal was a pitcher of the decade, and I'm stealing this line. Marichal was a pitcher of the decade and the decade of the pitcher, although, you know, Koufax was better. There's no doubt about that. Maybe Gibson was better.
Okay. Ray, you're the tiebreaker.
I'm going to go with number 27.
Would you please elaborate?
I think Charles's argument is slightly more compelling because the problem about evaluating pitchers is it's very much an individual skill. among guys who only play like one fourth or 1/5 of their team's games. And Marichal was an elite pitcher at a time when there'd never been more great pitchers in Major League history. I think Hunter's benefit is that he was the best pitcher on a staff of very good ones, especially in 72, 73, and 74. Whereas Marichal was elite all the time among a time in the National League when almost every team had a Hall of Famer in their rotation. Warren Spahn. Well, I'm going to have to go down the list. That's ridiculous. But I think Marichal's career resonates more, except in the one area that, that you look at and you go, well, was Hunter a better A or a Yankee? Whereas you knew with Marichal who he was and who he played for. So it's a tough one, but I'm voting for Charles.
Time for another bonus point. Trivia question. Santiago Casilla played for 2 teams in his career, the Giants and the A's. He came up with Oakland. He went to San Francisco, where he won 3 world championships and was the closer for 2 of them. He then finished things up with 2 more seasons with the A's. When Casilla first arrived in Oakland, however, it was under a different name. What was that name?
Thing.
Charles, I'll take it.
What was it? It was Waro Castro?
Eric, do you have a guess?
Jairo Garcia.
Jairo Garcia,
Okay.
indeed. Casilla was 19 years old when he signed out of the Dominican Republic. He felt that was too old to be effectively signed or effectively scouted within an organization. So he collected the birth certificate and ID of a 3 years younger friend, Jairo Garcia. It wasn't until 2005, his second season with the A's, that he came clean about his name and reverted back to how he was originally known. Okay, let's move on to the Cretan outfielder category. There are not a lot of players who did anything notable for both teams. One of them who did is Dave Kingman, who spent 16 years in the big leagues, the first 3 with the Giants, the last 3 with the A's. So the question is, Dave Kingman with the Giants or Dave Kingman with the A's? How say you, Charles?
He was a tremendous player coming out of college. He went to USC, got scouted by George Genovese. He was a tremendous scout with the Giants, was a tremendous pitcher in college, too. He had incredible stats at USC and was just a powerful slugger. His stats were good on the 71 division winner. 72, he was great. 73, he was good. And then went to the Mets and hit doubled the number of home runs he hit.
Eric, take Kingman with the A's.
Yeah, it's Kingman with the A's. When he was with the Giants, he averaged 19 homers a season. When he was with the A's, he averaged 33 homers a season. When he was with the Giants, obviously he was playing the field, which he was incapable of doing. He was a very poor first and third baseman. In his final season with the Giants, he made 19 errors and 52 fielding chances and was then released. When he was with the A's, he was the prototypical DH with old man power. In his final 3 seasons, he had 100 home runs in his 3 seasons with the A's and was kind of the leader of those teams that bridged between the Billy Ball A's and the powerhouse late 80s A's.
Okay. I would love to hear the judges' opinions on this, starting with you, Joan.
Oh, God. So, Eric, man, you got the numbers. You make such a compelling argument. I mean, the numbers are just there. It sounds like from your argument, he definitely was more productive and less of a liability because he wasn't playing the field. However, there is no way in hell I am choosing Dave Kingman with the A's because of the rat that he sent to Susan Fornoff in the press box. There was a lot of harassment we had back in the day as women. That was in a class by itself. That just, yeah, lack of class by itself. And So that is the only thing I can ever think of when I hear the name Dave Kingman.
Okay, Ray, how do you feel about Dave Kingman?
Well, if we're counting his essential loathsomeness, then the A's would be disqualified, but that's not the way I heard the question. And in terms of simple baseball, going to Oakland benefited him because he never had to have a glove in his hand. And because of that, all he had to do was swing from his ass and hope the ball hit the bat 35 times. So as a purely baseball exercise, him with the A's, as a human being, because he played with the Giants before he went to New York and basically soured on life in general, I mean, I would take the Giants, but that wasn't how I understood the question. So I'm going to basically annoy Joan and say, he was a much better guy with the A's, quality human being.
Chris Haft.
I'm going to go on one side. And as polished as Dave Kingman could be as an overall ball player, and he wasn't very polished, as everybody else is documented by or remarked about with his, he just could not play any position at all except hitter. I take Dave Kingman with the A's. There's no doubt there. He floundered with the Giants. One of the Giants' big failings is that he couldn't find a position for him. I happened to be there at the park for both of those pitching appearances he made in '73. It was an embarrassment to everybody. Him, Charlie Fox, the manager, the whole organization. But they couldn't find a place for him. An astute organization finds a place for that bat because he could hit, not very consistently. But I mean, I saw the guy hit the scoreboard at Candlestick, which was more than 100 feet behind the fence. Unreal. That said, he was more consistent with the A's. Well, as consistent as he's going to get, and so I'll go with Eric's argument.
All right. He was definitely a much better hitter with the A's. He did make his only postseason appearance with the Giants. He went 1 for 9 in the 1971 NLCS against Pittsburgh, which, of course, the Giants lost. Really, this question, I just wanted to hear Joan's rail on Dave Kingman. That's the whole purpose of it. I mean, not only did he send a rat to Susan Fornoff, he attached a note saying, "My name is Sue." He refused her interview requests all season long. Following his 400th career homer, he refused to talk to any reporters until Susan cleared out of the clubhouse, or at least that corner of the clubhouse. Yeah, he didn't sound like a very good guy to be around. Okay, so in 1975, the Giants sold Kingman to the Mets for $150,000. What do you got, Kingman or $150,000? Joking, don't answer that. Instead, time for another trivia question. Because this one has no actual connection to the A's, it won't be worth any points. This is just for extra credit. But it has to do with our last trivia question, which had to do with Santiago Casilla changing his name with the A's. The Giants encountered something similar with a player, albeit for different reasons. In 1985, Jose Uribe came to San Francisco as part of the trade that sent Jack Clark to St. Louis. Jose Uribe was not the name of the player the Giants acquired, however. He went by a different name in the minor leagues and changed his name twice prior to settling on the name we know him by now. Name either of his previous two names.
Ding. Jose Gonzalez.
Indeed. His given name is Jose Gonzalez. In many Latin American countries, people use their mother's last name as well. Uribe was his mother's name. When he got to the Giants, there was already a Jose Gonzalez in the National League West who played for the Dodgers. So Jose Gonzalez changed his name to Uribe Gonzalez, and then again a few days later to Jose Uribe. It did not take long before somebody tagged him as truly the player to be named later. Okay, guys, here's an easy one. Short on statistics, but a platform for potentially flowery rhetoric. Orange and black, or green and gold. Charles, start us off.
Orange and black. It goes back to 1883 with the New York Giants. It is, tradition. It's the color. It's, who the Giants are. It's Willie Mays. It's Bobby Thompson. It's Marichal. It is the Giants. The logo thing, that may change or change back. But the orange and black, when you see the orange and black, in San Francisco, they're a Giants fan.
Excellent argument. Eric, tell me about the green and gold.
It's Kelly green, it's Fort Knox gold, and it's wedding gown white. The A's have the best uniforms in all of sports. They're the only team in all of North American sports that has green and yellow as their main colors. It's really, unique to Oakland. The green and yellow look with the white shoes. I think a lot of folks feel that the A's have the best uniforms in sports, and how can you argue against the Kelly green?
There you go. And those white shoes, of course, Charlie Finley insisted they were made of albino kangaroos for many, many years. Okay. Ray, why don't you lead us off? What do you think?
Charles's argument is undercut by the fact that the Giants actually didn't wear orange and black until 1947. Before that, they had a series of other colors, including blue and red and purple for a year. So they sort of bounced around with a bunch of different things. The A's also don't have, this is not their original scheme either. They were yellow and white for a lot of years in Philadelphia. So this is a question that largely depends on how you feel about a color palette, which makes it almost nonsensical on its face. But I'm going to go with the Giants only because the A's had Kelly and gold, and then they went to that forest green, which was offensive and stupid, and people should be jailed for that because Kelly green was much better. If you can't figure that out and you go away from it, you must be punished. So I'm going with Charles.
I like what Charles said, is that when you're walking around and you see somebody in orange and black, immediately they're Giants fans. Now, I'm not, and I like that Eric said they're the only team that have that exact scheme, but there's a almost like a college feel to those two colors, unless you have an A's jersey on. So it doesn't, at least for me, it doesn't stand out. Like if I'm walking around and, somebody's in those two colors, I don't necessarily. And of course I am, outrageously biased toward the Giants. So I love the orange and black. And and I do think Charles made a good argument. So I'm in Charles' camp on this one.
Okay, Chris Haft.
I was all set to go with Charles and the Giants when Eric pointed out that the A's are the only team that have Kelly green and California gold or whatever it was. Fort Knox gold, wedding gown white and Vita blue, right, Eric?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, but
Vita looked better with orange and black.
he looked pretty good, didn't he? But that's just it. They wore those silly softball uniforms a lot. The black tops then, what the Giants did.
Yeah.
Just for the so-called, I guess what you would say, originality, and just listening to the arguments, I'll go with Eric and the A's for the fact that they had your sole team with that color combination.
Okay, point awarded. Let's move on to the front office legends category. Billy Beane or Brian Sabean? Eric, what do you think?
Billy Beane is the most revolutionary front office executive in any sport in the 21st century. He's, to my knowledge, the only one who's had a Hollywood movie made about him, and there's a reason for that. He innovated everything about how you run a front office, from hiring folks with sabermetric backgrounds to taking chances on guys that other teams didn't value because, their algorithm said, hey, on base percentage and the ability to do this, the ability to do that is more important than the player's physical tools that scouts see. So Billy Beane revolutionized the game. Also, the A's have been remarkably competitive on a shoestring budget for Beane's entire, I think, 24-year stretch as the GM. So I'm going to go Billy Beane here.
Okay. Charles, tell me about Brian Sabean.
I'm going with Sabean because Sabes, I think, is brilliant. Starting with, in the Bochy era, when he started drafting pitching, he got Sanchez, he got Lincecum, he got Kane, Brian Wilson. Not only that, but going into the 2010 season when it hit the trading deadline, everybody was saying, oh, they need to trade for another bat. They need to trade for another bat. No, Sabean was smart. He goes, no, I'm trading for a couple bullpen pitchers because we need to shore up our pen, which in the playoffs is a big deal.
Chris Haft, what do you think?
I think about Billy certainly has been an excellent general manager. I have to look at the bottom line is rings, championships. You go with the Giants. It's that simple. Sabian's batting average, so to speak, with his moves was just ridiculous over those years, the World Series years. But as Charles said, he set it up with it by drafting. They don't win if they don't draft. Lincecum, Bumgarner, and Posey. Back to back to back, and that's you can say, oh yeah, they're the number one draft picks. That still doesn't happen.
Sounds good. Ray Ratto.
This is another philosophical argument, and the reason why I will side with Charles here is because Billy Beane's theories have been proven true with other teams. He's never been able to do that himself. And Brian Sabian is probably going to be, at least for the foreseeable future, the last general manager to succeed with a scouting background. Because I think we are seeing a lot more general managers who operate the way Beane did, and before him, Sandy Alderson, who doesn't get nearly enough credit for the way the A's philosophy has spread. So I think because of that, Charles's argument resounds more with me, because while Billy was the first of his breed, he didn't get the full benefit of the theories that he and Alderson developed together. And Sabian will almost certainly be the last of his, at least until scouting makes a comeback with major league owners.
Okay. Joan Ryan, bring us home.
Again, Eric, you make very good arguments for all of it. I had to give you demerits for the fact that you you highlighted that they based a Hollywood movie on him, and that to me that doesn't make a better general manager in any way. But I like Charles' argument for a couple of reasons. One is pointing up that, yes, Sabian had these first round draft picks, all the rest of it, but he made his mark during those 3 World Series. And it as much as, Lincecum, they obviously drove the bus, but it was those picks that he got, Freddie Sanchez and Scudero and these people. He had, just almost a sixth sense, and that's the scout in him, right? Of seeing not just a player who could play, but the right fit in that moment.
Fun fact here, Billy Beane has the same middle name as another prominent Bay Area BB, Barry Lamar Bonds. Take that home. Time for another bonus point. This one is difficult. Charlie Corbel was a minor league pitcher for the Giants in the 1980s. There is one extremely notable aspect to his career. I'm guessing that you know what it was. Hold on. Let's give Eric a chance to weigh in. What was it? All right, Charles.
He was traded for Rod Beck.
Traded straight up for Shooter. Well done. Okay, back to the questions. 1989 World Series first baseman division. We are going to examine only the seasons they spent with San Francisco and Oakland, respectively. Mark McGwire or Will Clark? Charles, what do you think?
Will Clark, better glove, clutch hitter. First AB, he takes Nolan Ryan deep. Oh, that was beautiful. Hit 650 in the NLCS against the Cubs. In 87, he had 390, I think, against the Cardinals. Just a clutch player. Just everything as advertised. He was the thrill.
Perfect timing. He was the thrill. Eric, tell me about Mark McGwire.
Mark McGwire was with the A's for 10 seasons and change, and was elite as a power hitting first baseman for 7 of those. Will Clark had one good season in 1989 where he was the best first baseman in the National League. Every other year he was a very good player, but not elite. Mark McGwire was the greatest home run hitter of his era. What happened in the late 90s notwithstanding. He was a part of a World Series championship team and went to 3 World Series, which Will Clark can say neither of those. And he is, the better first baseman by a mile.
Excellent. Ray, why don't you lead us off?
This is a difficult one because the problem with McGwire for me is not the years he had, but the years he didn't. And the injuries to his foot, I think, robbed him of a good 4 seasons, and he didn't really find himself again until he got out of Oakland and into St. Louis. But we're not grading on St. Louis. I think in terms of the choices between the two, though, McGwire's best years were better than Clark's best years. And while they both started off as very good first basemen, Clark's defense deteriorated quicker because I think he sort of fancied himself more of a hitter. So I'm inclined to go with Eric here.
Okay, Joan.
When I think of McGwire, I think, he was, one redwood in a forest of redwoods. There were so many people who had such a huge impact on those A's teams. And obviously he had a big impact at the plate. And I think, Clark was a game changer for the Giants during those years he was with them. And I do think Clark made that, not only he had an impact on the team, but he made the guys around him better. His personality had an impact. His grit, his commitment, that high-pitched voice, as annoying as it was in the clubhouse, he was somebody they could make fun of. But he was just that guy who just lived baseball every moment, and nothing was more important to him. So I just, in terms of impact on a team, I think Will Clark. I got to go with Will Clark and Charles.
Okay. Chris Haft, why don't you break this tie?
Tough one here, because McGwire had obviously the greater peak, I guess, with the than Will did with their respective clubs. But I tend to look a lot at intangibles, and to echo Joan, Will had it all with the intangibles. I mean, they needed a guy. The Giants needed a guy like Clark in '86 when he came up. And he gave them exactly what they needed.
I will say that Clark with the Giants posted 4 top 5 MVP finishes. McGwire posted 1 with the A's. That said, he led the league in homers twice, his first year in Oakland and his last year in Oakland. It's a tough call no matter which way you go. Let's hit a trivia question. For a bonus point, in 1978, the Giants traded 6 players, plus a player to be named later, plus $300,000 to the A's. The easy question would be about who they acquired for that package. We all know it's Vita Blue. So here's the question. Other than Blue, name any 2 players involved in that deal.
Ding.
Charles.
Phil Huffman and Mario Guerrero.
Indeed. Mario Guerrero, Phil Huffman, Dave Heaverlo, Gary Alexander, John Henry Johnson, Gary Thomason, Alan Worth. Mario Guerrero was the player to be named later, by the way, plus $300,000. In that entire package, every player was gone by 1980. The A's did not get a lot in return for that deal. Point to Charles. We'll move on to the artificially juiced category. We're going to pit Barry Bonds with the aforementioned, hold on, I'm going to give you some qualifiers. Barry Bonds in 2001, when he hit 73 home runs. We're going to pit him against the aforementioned Mark McGwire and Jose Canseco in 1988, when they combined to hit 74 home runs. Eric, start us off.
Well, for starters, the 2001 Giants did not make the playoffs. The 1988 A's made the World Series, and most people felt were the best team in baseball that season. You had Canseco, who was a 40-40 threat. I believe he did it once. I don't know if it was 88. And McGwire, who was the best power hitter of his era and the best power hitting first baseman for a long stretch in all of baseball. That team was elite, and it was because of those two guys and an elite pitching staff. And the 2001 Giants, as good as Barry Bonds was, they were not a very good baseball team.
Eric, I am loving the fact that you're coming in under the wire every time. If I could give you a point for that, I would. Charles, what do you got?
Okay, Barry, when you get walked with the bases loaded in the ninth inning, come on. That's a scary hitter. He was up there in intentional walks. He was up there in unintentional walks, 73 dingers. While they didn't make the playoffs, they certainly made it in 97. They made it in 98. They made the wild card. 99, they lost to the Mets. As difficult a person is, and I'm not a fan of the steroid era, he was a beast. He was a hell of a player.
Tough to argue against that. Joan, why don't you start us off?
Well, you guys both make really good arguments for your players, and the way I look at Eric is swaying me, because the way I look at how a single player performs, to me, you can't take them outside of the team context, right? So it wasn't like Barry Bonds was in a home run, hitting contest at the All-Star game. He was playing for a team, and his team, he impacted his own numbers, but he obviously didn't help his team enough to get to the playoffs. And, that's not necessarily his fault, but, I don't think he elevated, the guys around him and the team, whereas McGwire and Canseco clearly did. That their team performed better, and at the end of the day, that's all that matters. So I'm going with Eric on this one.
Okay, Chris Haft, what say you?
I have to go with Eric and the Yays argument, the argument favoring Yays. They won more. Same thing, same reason. I went with Sabian and the Giants. A couple questions ago. It's really that simple. The Bash brothers have more of an impact on W's for that club than Barry did with the Giants. I mean, they came. The Giants, I remember in 2001, came down to the last weekend. That's nice in contention for a postseason spot. That's nice and all, but when the A's actually got there, so.
All right. Ray Ratto, close us out.
I think it's Eric, because the combination of McGwire and Canseco basically not only eat up two spots in the middle of the order, they benefited the four guys around them, like Dave Henderson, Carney Lansford, Terry Steinbach, and even Don Baylor, who didn't hit for much of an average, but was still sort of an important player there. And I think because of that, the emanation of having two guys of that level in the middle of the lineup benefits more of the lineup, which made the A's harder to navigate if you're a pitcher than just the single specter of Bonds, who a lot of pitchers basically neutralized by just putting him on first base. So I think Eric's argument is more compelling because two is more than one.
Can't argue math. All right, guys, that was our last question, and I hate to say it, but the Charlie Corbel for Rod Bet question is the deciding factor here. Charles, you won a squeaker. Congratulations to our Giants fan.
Charles.
Thanks to our contestants, Eric Stenholm and Charles Fraccia. Very well played by both of you. And to our amazing panel of judges, Joan Ryan, Chris Haft, and Ray Ratto. And thanks to all of you for tuning in to Pandemic Baseball Book Club presents A's versus Giants. We'll see you next time.